1 year. Very soon, it will have been 1 year since the still incomprehensible Hamas attack on Israel. 1 year since the IDF and Israeli state failed its citizens in the gravest way. 1 year since the mobs of Jew-hating, pro-Hamas thugs overtook the streets of Western cities, like Toronto, my hometown, where I am now, which has become unrecognizable. And 1 year since Carmel Gat was forced from her parents' home on Kibbutz Be'eri, forced to walk by her mother, just murdered on a kibbutz path outside the family home, forced into a car and taken by Hamas thugs into their maze of tunnel dungeons, where she existed for 11 months, no daylight, no fresh air, no hygienic facilities, where, at the end of August, a savage shot her and 5 other hostages in the back of the head and ran, left the bodies for the IDF to find. Carmel had recently turned 40 in May. Also, on October 7th, her sister-in-law Yarden had been taken hostage. Carmel's brother managed to escape with the couple's 3-year-old daughter by running and hiding in the killing fields near the kibbutz for hours and hours. His wife, Yarden, was released in November. Carmel and 3 of the murdered hostages were meant to be released on the final day of the November ceasefire deal. But Hamas reneged on that agreement on that final day, and we now know that sentenced Carmel to death. But she had been on the list. For many months now, I have been in contact with Carmel's cousins, Shay and Gil Dickmann. They are a very close family, and the Dickmann siblings have been unceasing advocates on behalf of their beloved cousin and all the hostages. I watch these devastated individuals pick themselves up, day in, day out, travel, challenge world leaders and institutions, and they never, ever waver. They never give up. Not then and not now. Not since Carmel's murder. They are exemplars of moral conviction and fortitude. Earlier this week, I spoke with Gil and Shay together. We discussed the surreal past and their determination to continue to fight for Carmel posthumously and all the others in captivity. As do I, they believe that the soul and future of Israel is at stake. We cannot abandon them to the cruel fate of death at the hands of Hamas in the tunnels. If we do, then we have truly lost our way. Also this week, Shay attended a demonstration outside the home of Gideon Sa'ar. A decade ago, he was a Likud star. He then bolted and created a new party and joined forces in the last election with Benny Gantz. As with most of these quickie hookups in Israeli politics, it didn't last long. Gideon Sa'ar's party is consistently polling below the threshold to enter the Knesset, in the unlikely event that an election would be called. But he also supports the Netanyahu government's approach to hostage negotiations, which is that the higher priority is to destroy Hamas, whatever that means, and then get the hostages out. Otherwise, he has said to the hostage families, otherwise we sacrifice future generations. This, he says, is the price we have to pay. And this, says Shay Dickmann, is unconscionable. Gideon Sa'ar has been flirting with the possibility of joining the coalition government and rumored to be discussing the defense portfolio. Why? Because Netanyahu and his extremist cabinet are itching to fire the Minister of Defense, Yoav Gallant, who is the only person in the cabinet who supports a hostage deal, immediately. So, Bibi wants him out. Gideon Sa'ar was floated as the possible replacement, but it seems that polls show that Israelis don't think he's got the right stuff for that position. And, based on discussions on the news on Saturday night in Israel, it seems that Gideon Sa'ar as defense minister is now off the table. But earlier in the week, that possibility seemed imminent, and that's why Shay Dickmann made a house call on Gideon Sa'ar. I'm Vivian Berkovich, former Canadian ambassador to Israel, and now working hard to understand the incomprehensible, but always with a state of Tel Aviv, state of mind. Stay with us. Last night, Shay, on Monday night, there was a demonstration gathering outside the home of Gideon Sa'ar. Gideon Sa'ar is a member of the Knesset, former Likud member. He left quite a few years ago because of disagreements, I gather, he had with Benjamin Netanyahu. And now we know that there is talk of Gideon Sa'ar being brought into the current government to replace the Minister of Defense, Yoav Gallant. I assume that the protest that you were participating in last night outside of his home was because of that rumor. So based on that, tell us why you and the others decided to protest, what you hoped to accomplish. And I gather you made some very strong remarks at that protest. Just tell us what happened.
So first of all, I'd like to say that I have my own political view, but at this point, the most important thing that any government that rules us should do is bring back our people to safety. And so for me, it doesn't matter who's prime minister and who's minister of defense, as long as they take care of the security of the 101 hostages must come back home. Gideon Sa'ar had spoken against the deal. He had spoken against the deal that was supposed to be accomplished on July, a deal in which Carmel, my cousin, and other people could have come back in alive. Carmel's name was on the list, and Gideon Sa'ar expressed his opinions against it. And one of his claims was that now we must approach victory for the sake of our children and grandchildren. And what he was not thinking about is the kids of Alex Lubanov, who are left orphans now, the future kids of Hirsch, of Eden, the future of Carmel herself. And this is something that I think must be corrected. The way I see it, a government must represent the voice of the people. And people here must raise their voices in order for the government to realize that what we want is them to take care of people in need, and that the people that their security is in a risk are the ones that their security should be taken care of. And if Gideon Sa'ar wants to be Minister of Defense, he must defend the people who are held in the hands of Hamas terrorists at the moment, first of all. The way I understand his opinions, the way he expresses himself in the media and also in private conversations with us, Gideon Sa'ar does not see eye to eye with the families of the hostages and with the people in Israel who seek the safety of the hostages.
And that would explain why there is some movement or talk of replacing Yoav Gallant with Gideon Sa'ar, because Yoav Gallant has been pushing for a deal and aggravating his cabinet and government colleagues. Did Gideon Sa'ar come outside at all to speak with the group, or he remained inside?
No, Gideon Sa'ar remained inside. At this point, these are still rumors. And the way I see it, the only reason for Gideon Sa'ar to get into the government is if he's going to make the deal that will bring our people home. And if he's not, he may as well stay outside. And as you said, Yoav Gallant was supporting us the whole way. He is defending the security of Israel and puts first in his priority the life and security of the people who need him the most right now, the Israeli citizens who are held in the hands of terrorists. And if any of our listeners maybe has criticism about citizens who address the government and have complaints or critical view of the government, I'd like to share with you the feeling of a relative, the feeling of a father who has his daughter in captivity. They wake up with the horror of what is going to happen to their daughter today. Just imagine having your daughter held in the hands of terrorists for hundreds of days, not knowing what is going to happen to her today, not knowing what she's going through, knowing that a deal would save her life, and the military pressure, doesn't matter if it's justified or not, is putting her life in risk because in any moment a terrorist is aiming a gun to her head. So this is the feeling of parents, brothers, sisters, children of hostages who are still held there. And while we speak, Kfir and Ariel Bibas, kids, one is 1.5 years old, the other is 5 years old, are learning about the world from terrorists who are holding them in captive, in tunnels in Gaza. So this is why we feel the urgency to speak to the people who are making decisions in our country in order for them to take care of our people who are in risk of their lives right now.
I'd like to pause here before we move into the second part of this podcast, which includes Shai's brother Gil. I have now been in Canada and the US for 6 weeks. I have spoken with so many people about everything going on in Israel, going on here, going on in the world. One issue that arises consistently surprises me. It is that people in North America criticize those, like Shay, who are protesting the Israeli government's position regarding the hostages. I have heard too many times the protests give oxygen to Hamas, that the protests fortify our enemies, that we should batten down the hatches. This is war. And the response is that we have towed the line, but that there comes a point where too many red lines are crossed and we must stand up and speak out, because we are fighting for our lives, literally and metaphorically. We are fighting for the core values of the state, which is to protect its citizens at all costs, to provide a safe haven for Jewish people. And the state failed its citizens so profoundly. If Israelis do not have faith in the IDF and government, if they lose the faith that has, to now, been inviolable and unshaken, that the state will rescue hostages and prisoners at any cost, then what is left of our moral fiber? What binds us? Ask yourself, when the heads of the IDF, Mossad, Shin Bet, the Minister of Defense, all publicly disagree with the Prime Minister and his extremist cabinet, and unflinchingly advocate to make a deal for the release of the hostages, are they working for or against the interest of the state and the people? Yes, we are at war. But if we do not stand up to this extremist government, in a very short time, the Israel that so many of us know, value, and love will be transformed into something very different. Now, we move to the discussion with Gil and Shay. Shay Dickmann, it is nice to see you again, although not under these circumstances. Gil Dickmann, good morning. Nice to see you as well. Thank you both for joining State of Tel Aviv.
Thank you, Vivian.
Your cousin, Carmel Gat, with whom you were very close, was murdered by Hamas in the tunnels at the end of August. And she was murdered along with 5 other hostages who, I think it's fair to say, had miraculously survived until that point, 11 months in that hell. When you heard the news, were you surprised, Shay?
When I heard the news, the first thing that came into my mind is that Carmel held on, that she survived. It was on the 328th day that she was murdered, but the first thing that got into my mind is that she held on until this point, that the hope that we heard from the hostages that came back, that was leading her way, the hope that she was giving others, the hope that we held on because we knew that she was holding it, it allowed her to survive the tunnels, to survive the hunger, to survive humiliation, to survive all the physical and mental conditions, the horrible conditions, until the point when she was shot. And this is something that no one can survive. So it was a mixture of feelings because I realized that, as we hoped, Carmel survived. And then I realized that she was murdered. And then I came to realize the conditions that she was going through, these hundreds of days that she was waiting for us to save her. As you said, she was together with 5 more people in the tunnels. We saw bottles in which she was supposed to pee in front of the 5 people that were with her and the terrorists that were holding her. We saw the narrow tunnel in which she was held, suffocating for air in darkness. It's hard for me to understand that my free spirit cousin, a person that used to travel the whole world, believe in people, believe in the good nature of humankind, the way her life was finished. More than everything, it was and still is hard for me to grasp the fact that we could have saved her. We could. Her name was on the list for a deal in which her sister-in-law was released. Her name was on the list together with 3 more people who were murdered this day in the same tunnel together with her. And this is something that I haven't yet totally, came to realize.
It's, to say it's shocking and horrific, there really are no words that do it justice. And I want to say to both of you, before we continue, how sorry I am personally for everything that your family and others have been through. And it's her death and the brutal way in which she was taken, but it's the 11 months of horror, unceasing horror, that led to this point. And I send you compassion and strength as you try navigating this grief, this inconsolable grief. Gil, you've been a fierce and tireless advocate for your cousin Carmel from day one. But once she was murdered, I follow you on X, and I see what a warrior you are. See how you fight, and I see the incomprehensible things that people say to you, particularly in your grief. But you made it clear from the first moment, Gil, that you were only going to maintain and increase your efforts to advocate for the hostage deal and hostage release. There aren't a lot of people like you. It takes tremendous spirit, integrity, and strength to do what you're doing. Tell us why.
First of all, thank you. I want to correct maybe some of the things you said, because I really do focus on the lives of the people that are still there. That's the most important thing. And that's why we're a part of this fight to begin with. What we care for is the lives of the people that we can still save. That was right when Carmel was alive, and it's right now when Carmel is no longer alive. But I must tell you that there are so many more family members of hostages who were killed in captivity and that stayed on the same track and stayed in the same group and stayed focused just as we did, just as my sister and I did. Esther Buchstab, whose son Yagev was murdered in captivity, she's still a part of this fight. Karmit Baltiketzir, whose brother was murdered, and the whole family of Avraham Munder, the family of Chaim Peri, Merav Svirsky, and so many more. There were 27 hostages who were murdered in captivity. I think answer to the question you asked, why do we do that, is because I feel like we failed Carmel. We had the ability to save her life. We knew exactly what was going to happen to hostages that we left there. We knew that. We just didn't know that it was going to be Carmel. We knew that if a deal wouldn't come in time, that would mean the death of hostages. And right now, I feel like we are a big warning sign, a huge warning sign for all the hostage families and for the whole world to understand that if we don't act quickly, we're going to lose more hostages, and we're going to do it knowingly because we know that's what's going to happen. And that means that it's our obligation, it's our responsibility to make sure that we do make this deal and we do bring these hostages back, because we will have time to achieve all other goals to this war, to destroy Hamas, to bring people back to their homes in the south and in the north. There will be so much time to do that. But Carmel's case and the case of all the other hostages who were killed in captivity show in the most precise way, in the clearest way possible. When we say now, when we say bring them home now, we mean bring them home alive. And if we don't bring them home now, we decide that we don't care if we bring them home alive or not.
I want to just carry on with this a little more, Gil. When you say that you feel that you failed Carmel because you knew this would be the outcome, just actually hadn't fully thought that it might be your loved one. But I'm going to suggest that the efforts made by you and the armies of family members and others who support your efforts have not resulted in failure, that perhaps it's the government that has led to this failure. Because at the end of the day, we're 11 months on. I've watched you guys from day one. You've never let up. I don't know if and how much more you can do. I can understand on a personal level the guilt, the heartache. Oh, maybe if I'd done that or that. But here we are. And we have a government, and Gil, you take them on head on. You did it before Carmel's murder, and you continue to do it. And I'm thinking, in fact, of one particular confrontation that you had with the Minister of Finance, Bezalel Smotrich, in which he said to you that what you were doing was cynical, that it was a cynical campaign. And I'd like to just hear you comment on that exchange, which for me was so powerful. And if you think that the government, this is months later now, do you think they're hearing you any differently? Do you think that you guys and others who support you are able to make and have an impact to get them to make a deal?
You had to remind me that he actually said that, but I didn't get hurt by hearing him say that. I think when he speaks to relatives of hostages and when he's accusing us of being cynical, he's actually showing us something very deep about himself. Because how cynical can we be? We're fighting for the life of our loved one. We're fighting for lives of our best friends' loved ones, because this whole hostage family forum became a large family for us. How cynical can that be?
I honestly had difficulty understanding how he intended that comment. I didn't understand how does he suggest that you are being cynical?
I think it shows you something about how disconnected some politicians can be. They think everything is a campaign. They see lives through a perspective of a politician, of a cynical politician. Thus, all of us must be cynical politicians. And he himself uses human lives to his own political gain. So when he sees us, the only explanation that he can give for our conflict is that we must be also doing the same. And I think it's not only him, it's many other politicians that we talk to. Some of them try to be nice, but then they make decisions that hurt the lives of our loved ones. Some of them don't even try to be nice and just act so cynically. And my sister Shay was also meeting some of these politicians who acted very much the same way. I must believe that there's a way to make them act in a humane way again, to remind them to remind the people of Israel again that we're humans, that we can make humane decisions like bringing people home, like saving lives before all political considerations. I think this is still possible because we're still a democracy. And most of the people of Israel want to see the hostages come home. What this government has decided is that you can spare human lives, the lives of the hostages, for any other reason. It could be the Philadelphia line, then it's the line. It doesn't even matter. The excuses don't even matter. But I still believe that we can change that because most of the Israelis still think what we think. They still agree with us that the lives of the hostages, and that means the lives of all of us as the people of Israel, as human beings, matter more than anything else. And that's why I believe that if we have the courage and if we have the strength and if we work, just like you said, tirelessly to make our voices heard, to get out on the streets, to speak out all over the world, so all the world understands the situation in which we are right now, we can get this message across. And our politicians will understand that we expect them to act for us, to save our lives, and to put the lives of the Israeli people above their own political interests.
And I have to say that I agree with you. But more importantly than that, I think that, and I felt this since October 8th, that the paramount issue in this war, this unbearable war, is rescuing our hostages. Because if we don't do that, and if we don't make that a priority, then we've lost our soul and meaning as a country. I feel that profoundly. And Shay, I want to just ask you, because I know you're both very connected to the whole organization, to the other families with whom you've gone through so much. I've seen you very active in the group of the young generation, as you call yourselves, and you've done some really extraordinary work. You're interacting with the families who have loved ones still in that hell. How are they able to, and are they able to maintain hope?
The way I see it, first of all, I have to tell you that every single day since I got the message, I need to re-convince myself that Carmel dead. For 11 months, we were holding on to the notion, to the hope that Carmel is alive, not being able to see her, to hug her, to see how she's doing. And now that I got the message, I still need to convince myself otherwise because of this habit that got so into my heart and soul. But now I can tell you and myself, Carmel is dead. But hope is not dead because 101 people can still come back to their families. And if there's something that Carmel had taught me, it is to take care of the people who are still alive and come back alive home. We know about Carmel's period in captivity, that first she was held with two teenagers, a brother and a sister. They came back on the deal in November, a deal in which Carmel was supposed to come back home as well. But they came back and they told us that Carmel was their guardian angel. They told us that she kept their spirits up. She held on to the hope that the three of them will be released. And she kept singing them songs, practicing yoga with them, doing mindfulness in order to keep their physical and mental health intact and give them the hope that they will survive and come back home. And they did. In front of my eyes, I see her spirits. And if for a moment I lose it and I think, what's the point? And now, what is my position in this struggle after Carmel is gone? Then I remember the thousands of people all around the world that have given me strength through this time. They, not having a relative in captivity, stood by me and they reminded me the hope. that Carmel, while she was alive, will come back home. And now I owe this hope and strength and standing by anyone that needs me to the people who still have relatives in captivity that can come back home.
And it must give them tremendous strength and succor to have people like you and Gil supporting them. I want to close with one final question to both of you. Gil first. What more can you do? We're out of time. You said you feel guilty. What more can you do? And do you think that you are getting through to the political leadership? Because at the end of the day, they're the ones who have to make a deal.
So I think the only thing to do is not to stop, is to continue, and it's to tell the truth, because the truth is so clear to us. Some people in the government, some people in the army have told us that if we apply more military pressure, we'll get the hostage sooner. And the results are the complete opposite. When there was a deal, we got Yarden back. When there was a military pressure, we got Carmel dead in a coffin. It's so clear. And that's why we must tell this truth, because some of the people in Israel and all over the world don't understand it yet. And if people understood it, they would do what we asked them to do. When people say we're sorry, what we reply is, don't say I'm sorry. Demand a deal. That's the most important thing right now. And I know that there are people who see that Carmel was murdered in such a vicious way in this tunnel, and what they feel immediately as the urge to revenge her death. And to them, I want to say, I don't. I think Shay agrees as well. And all of our family, we don't believe in revenge. We don't think the answer to this horrible death is more death that would just only grow this horrible cycle of violence that bring more and more death, and it will never end. The answer to this horrible death is life, is bringing the hostages back. That's our only way towards victory. That's the only answer to this horrible death of the other hostages, is to stop what we're doing and to go in a completely different direction that will bring about a deal that will bring the hostages home. And I think if we keep on telling this very simple truth wherever we can, and we ask for it and we demand it from the people who are supposed to represent us all over the world, we will achieve it. A deal will be signed. The only question is, how long is it going to take, and how many people we will lose in this long or short path. Make it short and make it so we lose the smallest amount of people as we can, because we have to save the lives of all of them if we can. And we still can. We can do it now.
Amen. I'll just make one small correction to what you said this time, that I will continue to be sorry and feel compassion for your loss and to fight. And I think that they're not mutually exclusive. And it's important that we do both, because one without the other isn't nearly as strong. Shay, is there anything that you'd like to add to what your brother has said?
I totally agree with my older brother, and I'd like to show it in a personal way in which it met me. You know, we had two beautiful relatives in captivity. One of them came back alive on a deal to hug her daughter, and the other, when the army came, the terrorist that was holding her shot her, and she was murdered. Her father will never hug her again. And I know that I would like to raise my children in a world in which you can tell your son or daughter that if anything happens to them, the worst thing in the world, their country will not give up on them. The first thing that their country owes them is their life, security of the person, and liberty. And I'd like to live in such a country that a person that was kidnapped alive from their home comes back home alive.
And amen to that as well. Shay Dickmann, Gil Dickmann, thank you so much for taking the time to get your message out, and we're going to get it out, and let's hope that we get some good news very soon regarding the rest of the hostages in Hamas captivity. Thank you for everything you're doing, that you did for your cousin, that you do for the country, and it's the world, because you guys are beacons for democracy and for standing up for the freedoms that we know can disappear too quickly.
Thank you, Vivian.
And thank you for listening and being here. I trust that the words of Shay and Gil Dickmann are persuasive and powerful, and I hope that you now understand the motivations behind the protests in Israel and the very noble goals of the hostage families and their supporters. This is not some wacky fringe movement. This and they are the heart and soul of Israel. We love hearing from you, so please comment on our website, stateoftelaviv.com, or send us a note to hello@stateoftelaviv.com. On behalf of the State of Tel Aviv core team, Jan Zabo, our creative, graphic, visual, and marketing man, Amir White, producer and editor extraordinaire, sound guy, who is also impressively patient with me and my boomer tech deficiencies, and our social media manager, who pitches in on everything, Maya Naftalin. Thanks to the team. Thanks to you for being here. We'll be back soon.